And one really important component of this is the influence of size on surface area to volume ratios. So when I'm talking about surface area to volume ratios, what I'm talking about is the ratio of the surface area that's exposed to the outer environment relative to the volume of the sort of liquids that fill up an organism, a cell, or any shape in general, okay? So for example, if we're looking at a eukaryotic cell over here and a prokaryotic cell over here, when we're talking about the volume of this cell, what we're sort of talking about here are the parts of the cell that are not directly exposed to the environment. So it has this cellular membrane all around it, or if you're a prokaryote, you have a cell membrane, a cell wall all around it, and that's the part of the cell that's exposed directly to the environment. And the volume is all the sort of liquid stuff that's on the inside of that cell that's not directly exposed to the environment. And the volume dictates the energy needs and waste production of any one of these cells. So the more volume you have, the more energy, usually in the cellular form of ATP, you need, and the more waste you're going to generate. So this larger eukaryotic cell has a much larger volume, and it's going to need a lot more energy to survive and sort of do the things that the cell needs to do to survive, and it's going to produce a lot more waste in that process than this prokaryotic cell. And when you think about the energy and nutrients that it needs and the waste that it's producing to sort of perform all the sort of cellular processes that a cell needs to do to survive, all of that stuff has to move into and out of the cell through the surface area, or the part of the cell that's directly touching or connected to the outside environment that's not part of the cell. So waste got to get out through that surface area that's connected to the external environment, and nutrients have to get in through that surface area that's connected to the external environment. When we're talking about a cell, an individual cell, that surface area is really the cell membrane, or in the case of the prokaryote, you have a cell membrane and a cell wall. So this is the, and if we're talking about a multicellular organism or some shape like that, so let's pretend this is not a cell, but this is like a multicellular egg or something like that instead of a cell. What we're talking about is the shell of the egg. That's the part of it that's exposed to the outside environment. Or if you're talking about a multicellular human being, you're talking about your skin. That's the part that's exposed to the outside environment. And in all those cases, that is the surface area. It's the area of the organism that's on the surface that's exposed to the outside environment. And we need to think about the idea here that if you're a larger cell or a larger organism and you have a larger volume, it means it's a longer distance to get from the center of that volume all the way to the outside or surface area. And that's important when we think about this idea of wastes moving out and nutrients moving in. So if nutrients move into the cell, they've got to get to every part of that cell and have to make it from the outside into the middle. And same deal with waste. If wastes are produced in the center of that cell, they have to move a further distance to get out to the outside. And as it turns out, as cell size increases, the volume of that cell actually increases at a much, much faster rate than the surface area. So your volume is your length times your width times your height if you're thinking about a cube. So it's a cubic, what's called the cubic function, because it's raised to the power of 3. Every time something gets bigger, it grows to the power of 3. Whereas your surface area is typically just a length times width thing. It's sort of your flat surface area, okay? And with a surface area, it grows in a squared function as opposed to a cubic function. So to the power of 2 instead of the power of 3. So what that means is essentially, as you get bigger and bigger and bigger, your surface area is going to grow at a slower rate than your volume is. And so this volume number is going to get bigger than the surface area number, such that this ratio, if you take the surface area divided by the volume, as these two things increase and something gets bigger, the ratio actually goes down. In other words, there's less of total cell organism, or it's total cell or the organism is in direct contact with the outside environment. So as you get bigger and bigger and bigger, less of your volume is directly exposed to the outside area relative to your surface area. So That is to say, smaller cells like prokaryotic cells have a higher surface area to volume ratio than larger cells. So bigger organisms, even though they have a larger total surface area, the amount of surface area relative to the volume is actually lower. So smaller has a higher surface area to volume ratio, bigger has a lower surface area to volume ratio. And this is important not only for the movement of nutrients and waste into and out of a cell or into and out of an organism, it's also really important for heat exchange and thermoregulation. So it's very important for organisms to keep at the right temperature. And so it's harder for heat to move into and out of, or it moves at a slower rate into and out of a larger cell than it does a smaller cell. So prokaryotes are going to heat up and cool down much more quickly because they have a higher surface area to volume ratio, whereas larger cells or larger organisms are going to heat up and cool down much more slowly because they're exchanging less heat relative to their total volume. And so that heat, for example, will get retained in the volume. It'll take longer to seep the whole way out of that organism because it has a lower total surface area relative to its volume. Okay, so all that stuff was maybe just a little bit confusing to you. And so what I've done is prepared this activity. It's a surface area to volume ratio quiz, where essentially you're looking at a set of cube and rectangular shaped organisms, so to speak, where this cube is either going to represent a cell or this cube represents a multicellular organism of different sizes. And you're going to figure out what happens to the surface area to volume of these sort of hypothetical cubic and square and rectangular shaped organisms as they change size and shape. And so for this Canvas quiz, please submit it, one per student, by the deadline that's posted on Canvas. Feel free to work with others or get help during lecture time. And please make sure it's submitted by the deadline that's posted, which is before the next lecture. Okay, thanks guys, bye.